The first artist we're showing is work by Josh Dorman, who's in this front area. And we're particularly excited because it's our first showing with him. And although he has had a long history of showing in Los Angeles and back east in New York and around the country, this is our first showing with him, and we've been such big fans over the years, so we're thrilled to finally have examples of the work in our gallery. So we appreciate your efforts in coming out, and we're hoping that you'll continue to come out and introduce yourself to him, and if you have any questions, to let him know. But I thought just to start that maybe he could just do a little informal walkthrough and reviewing of the work. These are all brand new works he made just for the show. They have not been seen before. And in particular, the drawings are a new format for him, so we're really delighted and we really appreciate all the effort that you put in. So, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Josh, and then we'll be followed up with David Balin in about 15 minutes or so.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone. It's always a little daunting trying to figure out what your work is about, or for me, because some artists have a thing they can say, and mine is pretty vast, and it's also that I want you to tell me what it's about. But I'll give you a few things, and I'll start here, because this kind of has literally the layers that I work in. Usually I start with topographic maps from about 100 years ago. And that evolution came from working with oil on canvas for many years, and then a sudden obsession with old paper, which came first through finding old ledger pages, and which got me drawing with pen and ink. And then I've always loved maps, never really been able to read them very well. And maps are kind of disappearing from our life. I mean, they're ubiquitous. We use them all the time, but they're virtual now, or they're digital. And I love old paper. So the maps came first, and then more and more collage came in. And so all these elements are from old textbooks. Some are engravings, some are early forms of reproduction. And I work with a lot of information that is very diverse, everything from cell structures to, I can just look through, skeletal things, old architecture, engineering, anatomy, what else, botany. So I collect these textbooks. It's kind of half my job is this obsessive collecting. And then I deface these old books that some people would have issues with. But part of what it's all about for me is the connection of everything to everything, which sounds very generic and cheesy, but it's, to me, really important that a cell structure looks a lot like a mushroom, which looks a lot like a planet. So I start with a base of maps, and I just build things, layer things. It's ink, collage, acrylic paint. These come from live plants that I put down, pour ink, let it evaporate, pull them up. So it's a very improvisational process. I mean, this one, in terms of narrative, I like the viewer to bring their own interpretation, but it's about relationships of humans to nature, how we're part of it, how we're separate from it. So there's a section that's architecture, kind of decayed architecture, machinery, hair, human heads, biological specimens, botanical things. This is the most recent piece. I'm still kind of getting used to it. And this, again, it's a weird relationship I have with the found materials. There's a little guilt involved in using someone else's art. I'm very conscious of, that a great illustrator made these animals. This was from a book of penmanship and calligraphy, so it was just a demonstration of how you can use a pen to make lines into forms. let me just move, I'll move down. You'll see at the end of the show are a series of graphites. Recently I've been weaving graphites into the paintings. I'm really interested in perspective and the fact that it's an invented system and skewing it dramatically. And I was trained as a kind of my most influential teachers were really formalist abstraction teachers. So I'm really, even though there's a lot going on, a lot of recognizable forms, narrative, I'm really thinking about shape relationships, kind of above everything else, how forms relate to each other, and move you through the space. And I'm thinking about shifting space and scale constantly, so how much can happen within 4 inches, looking aerial view, side view, up, down, from microscopic to cosmic. I do have to think about what they're about. What I love is when I talk to people who see my work or like it, they often have very clear interpretations of it. Whereas for me, it's very improvisational and intuitive. I know I want a pool of drowned, buried things. I know I want to contrast mechanical with natural.
Is there generally just a thought or an emotion that comes up as the impetus, or?
I start with sketches, very small pencil sketches. But it's not one feeling. It emerges as it builds, the kind of world it's going to be, and it never is finished until it's finished. So I'll layer things on top of things.
So in this one, was there a hook, something that established the space and established a theme for you, and that you worked out of?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this pool has been a recurring theme for probably 10 years now. The pool and a contrasting 2 sides of a form. This is actually St. Louis right here. I've worked with this St. Louis map that I had multiple copies of. Yeah, so it can be as simple as that kind of pool theme. This one, does anyone recognize what this is from? Art history majors?
Looks like a shower.
Well, the structure is the same, but it's actually stolen fairly directly from Bruegel's Tower of Babel. And this is probably the 3rd or 4th Tower of Babel painting I've done. But this one is really taken, he did several versions, but the composition is taken fairly straight from that composition. He had a lot of people doing things, they had no people. And these, if you look closely, this is from old patent books from 1900, which I just cut up and weaved together.
The maps that you do they have specific relation to the piece or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. Sometimes they do. It's partly what I can find, and it's more the visual connection to it, whether it's a desert landscape or a city landscape affects what happens.
I can't even quite see where there's a map, or is it
this whole surface was a map to start with. So you can see bits of it peeking through here.
Right.
And what I do also actually, where is it? I play with the text in the map too, so I'll enhance certain words or change them or add letters. So lost me.
Have you ever used the book after you've extracted out the illustrations as an actual form to work on from there as well?
Or? Actual book?
Yeah.
I have done some books where I alter the text and the image, but I do use this stencil that's created from cutting out forms also.
Gotcha.
And this is a good example of messing with perspective, obviously. because I'm not really interested in a single viewpoint. I mean, it's kind of a take on cubism in a way, that we don't experience the world as a photograph, as a snapshot. We can look at microscopically or move our eyes around constantly. And I want to draw people in to look at the microscope.
How many images do you start with before you start actually putting them down?
That's a good question. It's a weird process. My studio is like a chaos of books and things that are cut out ahead of time, and then I know I have like my engineering books on this shelf, my animal books on this shelf, this is from an old like clothing catalog from 1900 or something, Tinker Toy. So I have things I know to go with, but it's very improvisational.
Do you sometimes cut things out before you even know where you're going to use them, or do you wait until you...
I do. I have a backlog of things cut out, but sometimes I use them, sometimes I forget that I've cut them out. It's a very loose process.
Josh, do you work on the pieces in horizontal as well as vertically?
That's a great question. I was just talking to somebody about a show at LA Louvre where the guy built a special bed to hover above the paintings. I mostly work on the ground, lying on top of them,
Okay.
or on a table with them, because it's very drawing oriented. But I always put them up. I'm very interested in the overall composition, so I always put them up and go back and forth that way. But I do need to be very close to them.
So if the map is like the God's eye view, is the stuff that's bigger to the viewer what we would see if we were to like zoom in on the map and go down into...
That's a great interpretation. Yeah, and I mean, my hope is that as with reality, you can zoom in and in and in. I'm fascinated with the idea of fractals and the repeating forms in nature, although like I'm glad to be able to use that without understanding the math of it. But that's very important to me. And I guess I'll end here, which is a kind of an odd, different thing. For me, these are almost like my minimalist works. And it's a very weird, for me it's a very weird process that I wouldn't recommend. I teach, and I would never tell a student to do this, but they start here just with a pencil, like rubbing a pencil, and they move this way without any sketch or anything. And they used to be just graphite. Recently I've started gluing just a few collage elements. But to me it's a mysterious process. How it emerges, I really just start rubbing a pencil, and when I see something I push it. Yeah.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.